Ezekiel Marsh had been watching the storm clear when he stumbled into something no one on his ranch expected: two giant Apache women lying near his dying cattle, hurt and drifting in and out of consciousness. They were not ordinary travelers. Even when collapsed, their size was imposing. One easily over 6 feet, the other nearly 7. Bodies built for battle and survival. Their beadwork and jewelry told Ezekiel they were Hyban, worth more than the failing property he'd struggled to keep afloat. The smaller woman's clothes were torn and stained. Blood seeped into the dust beneath her. The taller woman gasped, each breath a labor, in a place where choices often meant survival or death. Ezekiel's instincts screamed that helping them could be suicide. Settlers had been punished for far less than harboring Apache. But when the larger woman's eyes opened and found his, he didn't see rage. He saw fear, raw and human. Some part of him, maybe the memory of his sister Elizabeth, who had died in a winter fever, softened. He could not turn away. He dragged the wounded woman toward his cabin as the bigger sister fought to help. Their weight was immense. The wounded woman was heavier than any steer Ezekiel had dragged. He struggled to fit her through the narrow door, turning her sideways, careful not to worsen her wounds. Outside, dust on the ridge hinted that riders were coming. The scent of rain mixed with the distant thud of hooves. From the ridge, 5 riders watched, their faces painted and rifles slung. Ezekiel's pulse hammered. Even if the women were innocent, harboring them would brand him as an enemy. He asked the woman who could speak her name. "Ayana," she said in a low, commanding voice. Her sister's name was Atel. Through clipped words, Ayana told him why they were running. Itel had refused the chief's son's demand to marry, and now the pair were hunted for that refusal. The reason was as simple as it was brutal. A refusal that threatened politics and pride. Ezekiel checked his ammunition, 12 rounds in the rifle, 6 in the pistol. Against 5 experienced warriors on their home ground, that was not enough. Still, to Ezekiel, sheltering them felt like something else entirely. This wasn't politics for him yet. It was 2 wounded people who needed help. The women's presence forced him to pick a side. Protect them and risk the wrath of neighbors and lawmen, or deny them and sleep with the knowledge he had let them die. Footsteps and voices made the stakes clear. The riders were closing. Through a crack in his shutters, Ezekiel saw the lead warrior point toward his cabin. Their presence meant more riders could be coming. They never traveled without a war party, unless something severed them from protection. Ayana murmured that the pursuers might not be after her, and Itel alone. Something else had driven them apart from their people. A memory surfaced in Ezekiel's mind months ago. He'd helped a fevered girl by the river, nursed her until she could go home. He had never thought it would reach this. Outside, the warriors slowed, then one called in English, demanding Ezekiel come out. The world had narrowed to the cabin and 3 breaths. Ezekiel's hands shook as he weighed the options. He could lie, hide the women. Lie again, maybe the marshals would leave. He chose the other path. He told the truth. 2 Apache women were inside, wounded and in need. The moment he admitted it, he knew the lawman would see betrayal if they believed him, and the Apache would see weakness if he lied. Either way, things could end in blood. They came anyway, lawman this time. Deputy Marshal William Kane and 2 others rode into the lamplight, hard men who took Apache matters seriously and quickly. Reports of Apache near the area and of attacks on a neighboring ranch had put the marshals on edge. Footprints around Ezekiel's cabin were huge, left by the giant women, and the bloodstains were impossible to explain away. Ezekiel lied at first, claiming an axe slip. The lie floundered under Kane's scrutiny. Tension mounted like the storm had never left. Before anything could explode, a distant set of hooves announced reinforcements. The situation grew more dangerous, or perhaps less, depending on who rode in. More marshals poured into the valley, and now 6 armed men swept Ezekiel's property. It felt hopeless. If the marshals found Ayanna and Itel, they wouldn't hesitate. Ayanna did something the marshals didn't expect. She stepped into the doorway. Even wounded, she filled the space with authority. Her nearly 7-foot frame and unbending gaze made the deputies hesitate. She announced, in clear English, that Ezekiel had saved Itel once, 3 moons ago, and that Apache law provided protection for those who saved a life. The marshals had heard of such laws before only as tales. Today it landed like a sharp fact. Kane's skepticism swung into rage. Federal law, he said, superseded tribal practice. But treaties and politics are not only about brute power. A treaty signed the previous winter recognized certain Apache customs in territorial matters. Kane's bravado slipped when reminders of that treaty were raised. The marshals had to hold their guns, but not their disbelief. This was not a simple shoot and seize. Ayanna said wait until the chief comes at sunrise. He would resolve what federal law and Apache law both could not casually settle. The marshals set up a perimeter. No one was budging until dawn. That night stretched long. Ezekiel sat awake mending bandages by lamplight, aware each creak might be the last thing he heard. Itel's fever broke, and with it, a quiet gratitude. The 2 women watched Ezekiel as if measuring him. Ayanna's words at one point were more than thanks. They were observation. He was different, she said, meaning he'd acted not out of calculation, but something stranger and harder to name. Midnight brought another threat. 3 riders, but not Apache. Deputy Marshal Kane recognized them and realized the stakes had just multiplied. Federal attention meant pride, politics, and perhaps a desire to make an example. The marshals demanded a search. Ezekiel, who had already told the truth, could do nothing but stand as the lawmen swept through the yard. When discovery seemed inevitable, Ayanna and Itel walked out themselves. The sight of such towering, wounded women gave the marshals pause. The presence of imposing warriors did not automatically mean guilt, and their bearing suggested that they were not common criminals, but something more bound by culture and law. Ayanna explained the life debt. Ezekiel had once saved a chief's child, and such a deed carried obligations under Apache custom. For a moment, law and custom collided in a way that made the marshals uneasy. Then the morning horses came, dust rising with their approach. As Chief Nalish arrived with elders, he dismounted with quiet dignity, the kind that commands attention without weapons. His English was perfect when he used it. His presence alone shifted the balance. He called Ezekiel by name and spoke plainly. You saved my daughter. For that, there is a life debt. He also said the debt could be more complex when more lives are saved. In a single, deliberate move, the chief produced a carved bone and silver necklace, a symbol of family and rank. Instead of punishment, Chief Nalish did something few expected. He declared Ezekiel worthy of adoption into his family. Under Apache custom, backed by treaty precedent, this gave Ezekiel protection and status. The necklace, placed around Ezekiel's neck, felt like both a binding and a release. Marshal Kane's anger had nowhere to land. The political implications were enormous. Tribal law, a federal treaty, and an adopted son who could bridge both worlds. But the chief was not finished. That evening, he told Ezekiel to think about what adoption truly meant. Being family under law was one thing. What about the heart? Over the following months, Ezekiel's failing ranch transformed. The adopted connection allowed for trading and negotiation that had been impossible before. Apache families came openly now. They traded and spoke and made the place into a hub. Ayana and Itil, those towering women who had once put Ezekiel's life at risk by making him choose, became indispensable. Itil's steady intelligence and Ayana's unmatched strength reshaped the work on the land and the nature of the trading post. And yet something else shifted. As Ezekiel worked beside Ayana, watching how she moved and how she guarded people with a ferocity that hid a softer center, he felt his feelings change into something more than respect. He cared for her. The paradox pinched him. She was now his sister under Apache law, protected by rules that made forbidden the very thing his heart wanted. Chief Nalish read the situation with the same steady thoughtfulness he applied to every problem. He called everyone together and spoke an unusual decree. Apache law could release Ezekiel from the legal bonds of adoption if the family agreed. Itel, the younger sister, surprised none by her clarity. She released Ezekiel from brotherhood and urged that he should have the freedom to choose his path. Ayana, too, declared that Ezekiel had proven himself worthy, not as a brother, but as a man. In an ancient ceremony reworked for strange new times, the chief pronounced that Ezekiel would be free from the adopted bond and, if he chose, could unite in marriage with Ayana. The ritual that followed blended Apache tradition with legal reality. It was a union that recognized two worlds, not by erasing difference but by weaving them together. The federal officials watched, helpless to undo what the treaty and tribal customs had allowed. The wedding was a sight to behold. Ayana stood tall and regal in a dress that made every onlooker stare, a giant among women yet graceful and full of pride. Itel laughed like a bell, delighted as the two families came together. The trading post prospered in the months after. Travelers came to see the giant women who worked with rugged skill and commanded respect. The land that had been on the brink of failure became profitable, alive with trade and new relationships. Washington's investigators slowly cooled. Political minds realized that making an enemy of Chief Nalish would cost more than the spectacle of rooting out one rancher. The treaty, the adoption, and the chief's diplomacy turned a potentially explosive crisis into a quiet form of power. Ezekiel's life had changed in ways he could not have predicted. He found not only prosperity but a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he'd been missing. 6 months later, as Ezekiel watched Ayana direct men building an expanded home with calm authority, he understood a truth that had been waiting beneath the dust all along. Sometimes what looks like impossible trouble contains the seed of something better. The giant sisters had brought him danger, but they also brought him love, community, and a place at the heart of a world bigger than he'd ever imagined. If this tale of courage and unlikely kinship moved you, there's another story on your screen that will tug the same threads of frontier life and human choice. Subscribe to keep hearing these strange, fierce stories. Every one of them shows how a single act of mercy can reshape everything.